What's up, guys? I'm EJ. I'm joined by Kendall, and thank you so much for checking out this edition of our virtual NBA Draft War Room. Today, we're going to be talking about the San Antonio Spurs. Kendall, the Spurs, not the kind of season they're accustomed to having. They missed the playoffs, did not have a winning record. Of course, this is a franchise. When you look at them, considered one of the gold standards, but this certainly wasn't the kind of season that they're expecting. And now they're kind of a team in obvious transition. I mean, two of the best players, DeMar DeRozan, LaMarcus Aldridge, both north of 30. Marcus Aldridge well north of 30, 34 years old. And the youth movement that they have there, players that I think are still really developing, trying to figure out where they kind of stay in this NBA. What do you make of where the Spurs sit right now?
Yeah, the San Antonio Spurs are a little bit of a team in no man's land right now. Um,
Not where you want to be.
they
Not so.
have, like you
That's not
said,
where you want to be at all.
that's probably the least desirable spot in the NBA to be in. And look, they have decent young, like you mentioned. I think we all like Dejounte Murray. Lonnie Walker showing some flashes. We haven't seen much from Luka Samanic yet, who they drafted last year, but he's a decent prospect. Keldon Johnson showed really good flashes last year when he played. So I mean, look, the Spurs have and obviously guys like Derek White, Jakob Poeltl, like they have a decent base. Chimezie Metu even a decent base of prospects, but no guy that you look at as a future face of the franchise kind of guy. And so that's what the Spurs are really looking for. And they haven't drafted this high in 2 decades, but but we're still in a situation where even now, this is a draft that, maybe they're not even drafting. They could be drafting higher, depending on how things play out. But this will be an interesting spot. This is a team that needs a star coming out of this draft because, again, they don't have one right now. And, you have guys like DeRozan and Aldridge, and we'll see what happens with them in terms of free agency and trades. But, they need a guy that they can look forward to as a future face of the franchise guy. And they don't have that right now.
Yeah, and the one thing about the Spurs, Kendall, is they've shown in the past. They're not once again a team that needs to be drafting in the top five or three even to get real franchise changing caliber players. Of that big three, two of them were not drafted anywhere near the lottery, in Manu Ginobili and Tony
Yeah.
Parker. Kawhi Leonard obviously was drafted 15. So sitting here at number 11, they may get the guy they want, but based on kind of how I see where this draft may be shaking out and the way the players that I look at for them may be rising, they may need to try to move up a couple of spots. And I'm curious, will the Spurs do that? They were aggressive with Kawhi Leonard and trading a player in George Hill. A lot of people were very upset in San Antonio. They really thought that George Hill was a developing player for them, and he is a good player. But man, I mean, talk about a coup, getting a player like Kawhi in that deal. So will we see Brian Wright? Will we see R.C. Buford and Pop make that kind of aggressive move this year as well? Will they stand pat at 11? We'll see. Let's talk about this season once again. So the record 32 and 39. They did make it to the Orlando bubble, but did not make the postseason. I thought they played okay down there. They didn't embarrass themselves, but not enough to make up the ground needed to get into the postseason. They own picks number 11 and 41. For team needs, Kendall, I put front court depth. I think that when your two primary front court players are Rudy Gay and LaMarcus Aldridge, I mean that's a lot of age right there. Those guys are logging a lot of minutes at the 4 and 5 for them, and their best days are well behind them. So they do have some other players. You mentioned Jakob Poeltl. You mentioned Metu, who also is could potentially be a free agent. So I don't think there's any way they'll let him go because he has a partial guarantee. I think that they could probably use some depth in that spot, whether it be the 4 or 5 spot. So I would certainly look there for 1. 2, I put athleticism because once again, this is a team that in the front court and the major spots is a little older. And even their backcourt players, not particularly great athletes, with the exception maybe of Murray. And Murray is, of course, still coming off a knee injury. But excellent defender and a very good athlete. Besides him, though, this is not a team with a great athletic profile. Besides Lonnie Walker, to be fair, the Spurs have never really been a team that's relied so heavily on having the greatest athletic profile. But I think that they could still fix that on their roster. And then I put shot creators because I'm gonna say it for a third time. DeRozan and Aldridge being your primary shot creators at this stage of their careers. You're just going to need more help. There's no way that those are the kind of players At this point,
And
that should be just carrying your offense, which is what they
this
pretty much
stage is
did.
basketball.
Yeah,
They're still good
you're right
players,
about
but
that.
playing through Aldridge and DeRozan is like, I mean, that's a dynamic combo in 2007, but in 2020, I don't know if that really is the way you really want to play basketball nowadays.
And the other thing about playing through them too, and one thing I thought was fascinating in doing my research on the Spurs is, they were an excellent 3 point shooting team. They were at least top five in 3 point percentage, but they don't shoot a lot of threes, and we know that's kind of been a sticking point for Pop. And when you talk about playing, that's like kind of a an old school style of a tandem measure 1 and 2. Those guys live in the mid range. And again, I'm not saying that mid range is bad. I am not someone who thinks that all mid range shots should be thrown out. But considering they do have some shooters, you wonder if moving away from some of those guys, some of those players, those plays that maybe help them and maybe get those other guys in better looks. We know Bryn Forbes is a sniper. We know Patty Mills can light it up. And some of the other guys maybe will get more shots. Eric White, you know, they need to figure out. I think they're in a kind of an identity crisis right now, and they got to figure out what they are in 2021, 2020. I think that whatever Spurs basketball was, they can't do that with this roster, and I'm not even sure if that is the way they need to be playing basketball right now, considering where the game is going. So it's a big off season for the Spurs. Free agents. You mentioned DeMar DeRozan. There is no way in hell he's getting rid of that $27 million player option, so he will be back. Marco Bellinelli, Pop favorite. He will be a free agent along with Jakob Poeltl, who they got in the Kawhi Leonard deal. Brent Forbes, again, another great shooter. He's going to be a free agent. Trey Lyles has a partial guarantee of $1 million. I would assume they would bring him back. He's only making about $5 million. And you mentioned Chimizi Metu, his contract's non-guaranteed, but he did show some flashes. Tyler Zeller has a non-guaranteed deal. Drew Eubanks and Quindary Weatherspoon are their two-way players. And like I said, Brian Wright, new general manager, first year on the job. He took it from R.C. Buford, who's still in the fold. He's the CEO of the team. Of course, Greg Popovich is going to have a lot of say in any front office decisions. So that's kind of a three-headed monster they have over there with the Spurs and coming into this offseason. I think it will be potentially, I think it should be a transformative one, even if they don't look at it that way. I think they do have to really make some big decisions. So Kendall at number 11, or whatever we want to talk about in regards to a trade up potentially, what do you think the Spurs should be doing with this first pick?
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be the Spurs are going to be a team to watch in this draft. Certainly, I mean, Matt Babcock from Babcock Hoops came out with a report recently that people around the league think the Spurs are up to something big. We don't know what it is, but there's talk that the Warriors have interest in LaMarcus Aldridge. They also worked out Denny Avdia, and that is the guy that if the Spurs can get, I would certainly target is Denny Avdia. Now he's not going to be there at 11, certainly, but if there was a situation where he could get into the top five and he was available, to me, I'm not attached to anybody on the Spurs roster. There's certain guys you'd like to keep, certain guys I'd feel bad about getting rid of. But I feel like there's a path to them getting into the top five without giving up like DeJounte Murray necessarily or Keldon Johnson. The guys that you might really want to keep. And that to me is what I am looking at mostly if I'm the San Antonio Spurs. I feel like Avdia fits what the Spurs model has been for 20 years. He's a guy that plays really good team basketball. And I feel like he's a guy that needs to go to a team that's going to be competitive, and the Spurs will be competitive. They're not going to be the best team in the league, certainly, but he can play a role initially in San Antonio, and similar to what Kawhi Leonard did, and then eventually, develop and develop and develop until he's that star type of player. And I think he has that upside, but I think he needs to be in the right development system. And obviously, his jump shot, there are some question marks, but Spurs have one of the best shooting systems in the league as well. Obviously, they've, Chip England and that group has developed guys like Kawhi Leonard. DeJounte Murray didn't have a jump shot once in a blue moon ago. Now he can hit shots. I mean, so I wouldn't be concerned about that if I'm the Spurs. And another guy, if you traded up to look at, or this guy could fall to 11, surprisingly enough, to me even, is Killian Hayes. Obviously, again, French point guard Spurs haven't had issues with that before. But he's the type of guy that I think has a dynamic shot creation that you talked about that they have lacked since Kawhi Leonard left, and that is that is appealing to me. I don't think he's raw. Obviously you have DeJounte Murray, but DeJounte Murray can play the two. Like he can play out the ball. You can certainly guard anybody really, and I think him and Killian Hayes will be a really interesting backcourt. So those are the two guys I would target if I'm the Spurs uh, in a trade-up option primarily.
Yeah, I mean, I think that both fits you mentioned make sense. I like Avdia a lot. I think that clearly the wing, another wing player next to DeRozan, is needed. But again, like I agree, I don't necessarily feel like you really should be thinking really about DeRozan or really anyone that isn't young on this roster. So I think you got to just kind of go for what player fits what you guys like to do and your development system. And I think Avdia, for many reasons, makes a lot of sense. He's a defensive stalwart. He can obviously play make. He's unselfish. He can shoot. Plays the right way. I mean, he definitely seems like a pop player. He's absolutely a player you're going to have to trade up a great deal to get. But again, it sounds like the Spurs may want to be
Long
aggressive
term,
here.
you're going to need a guy who can guard a certain other European superstar in that division.
Very
And,
true.
Denny Avdia may be a guy, and maybe it's other guys in this draft that you may be looking at.
And that's eventually it's funny that you say that because when I looked at their team, like I said, to me the athletic profile thing in the front court depth were the two things I thought that could be fixed with where they were drafting. Shot creators is going to be a little hard at 11. I did give some consideration to City Bay because of that, but I think that again, athletic profile of the team, I think I'm not sure if he really makes sense for that pick. So the first guy I would target for them is Patrick Williams from Florida State, a guy we haven't got to mention, which is kind of weird because he's probably the most talked about player right now in terms of the draft buzz and kind of the draft nerds and who we're talking about.
Video on the Patrick Williams situation.
Yeah, because this is a guy we haven't got to talk about much yet. Earlier in our videos he wasn't as high, and now he's rising, and now we're kind of in a select group of teams, but I think we're going to start hearing his name now a couple times in this division. I think that the Spurs, I think Patrick Williams makes a lot of sense. Again, strong athlete, excellent defensive player. I think that there is certainly no reason to believe he won't be able to make NBA threes. I know his percentages weren't the greatest, but he has an excellent pull-up game. He's a very good free throw shooter. So I think that he'll make NBA threes. I'm not really concerned about that. And to me, again, I think about the Spurs type of player and their development style and the development system. I think that Patrick would be a great fit, particularly because I think the Spurs team, with this pick, I'm not really interested in what the guy's going to do for me next year per se. I'm more interested in, what kind of player do I want to bring in that's going to fit the long-term ideal of this team. And I think the Spurs have always predicated themselves on ball movement, team play, and defense, and high skills. Williams fits all three molds, or four molds, whatever I just said. All the molds I just named, he fits all of them. The only question with him is just, the production wasn't really there last season. So do you believe in the little bit you saw from him playing on a similar team in Florida State? Again, a team that predicates itself on defense, team play, and do you believe that will translate? And I think, while I may have questions overall for just him as a player, I don't have questions that it could translate for the Spurs. So I think he would be my first option there. If you couldn't get Patrick Williams, I think Isaac Okoro is another obvious choice. I feel like they're gonna have their choice of one of those guys probably at 11, because it seems like whoever was thinking about taking Okoro, if they take Williams, I mean Okoro will slip probably to around 11, and then vice versa. I think those two guys are almost intertwined in their draft, in their draft position, their draft destiny.
This draft
so I think either one would fit well with the Spurs. So I would be fine with Okoro too.
Yeah, I mean, this draft is so volatile in the terms that you could have players that, like Okoro and like somebody's gonna drop to the Spurs. Somebody's projected to go in the top 10. Because everyone's projected to go in the top 10 right now. So, again, that's why I mentioned Killian Hayes. I don't think Killian Hayes should drop out of the top 10, but, if Patrick Williams is in the top 10 and then Okoro's in the top 10 and Okongwu, like someone's gonna be there. That Spurs are gonna be like, wow, this guy fell into our lap. And the Spurs have always been great about the guy that falls into their lap. You know, like DeJounte Murray when they were drafting at 27 a couple years ago. Guy, he was invited to the green room because people thought he could be a lottery pick. He falls all the way down to 27, and I don't know if the Spurs thought he'd be there, but once he was there, they realized, well, the talent is too much to pass up on DeJounte Murray at 27. And remember, I loved DeJounte Murray at the time, but that was a situation where they weren't gonna go, oh well, he's not really on our board right now. You know, we really liked some guy that was supposed to go in the second round. They took the guy who was a lottery talent. So I think if somebody like Okoro dropped to 11, they would certainly or Killian Hayes, they'd certainly snatch him up. Patrick Williams, I have my concerns. I won't go too in depth with it, but in the short term, in a short form, he's not an NBA ready player right now. His production to me doesn't suggest that he is going to be productive at the NBA level early on. I mean, some teams can deal with it. I think the Spurs are probably one of the few teams that you don't have that concern because, again, development has always been a key part of their identity. And if Patrick Williams goes to the Knicks or the Pistons, I may have a little bit more concern about what his long-term outlook is going to be. But if you're talking about the San Antonio Spurs, I have less concerns about it. But I just think that there are better players in this draft, guys who have shown more. I mean, Patrick Williams, even when you look at his best performances, they were against bad teams. When he played against, I mean, the ACC wasn't really at its strongest this season to begin with. Florida State may have been the best team in the ACC, but they played Duke once, didn't play that great. Played Louisville, didn't play that great. Virginia didn't play that great. His best performance was against like Georgia Tech and a bunch of non-conference opponents. So, the jury to me is still very much out on Patrick Williams. I know everybody's very interested in him, but we can get more in depth maybe at a later date. But it'll be interesting. But Okoro to me, if for one of those two guys, I would certainly lean Okoro. I like Precious Achiuwa also. He's a guy that if he dropped to 11 and the Spurs looked at him, we've talked about him plenty of times, so I won't go too in depth, but he's a guy that I would also look at.
Yeah, and I get the concerns with Williams. When it comes to for example, the Knicks pick or the other picks we've talked about, the Wizards. I have not been high on drafting him to those places because I agree. I think that wherever Patrick goes, it's going to have to be a team that's willing to be patient and willing to understand that this is still a developing player who has all of the physical tools and some of the framework for the skills to be a very good NBA player. It's just not put together yet. He's been coached very well, so that's going to help him, and that's why he was able to be such a functional player for Florida State last year. But it's going to take some time. I think that's why I thought the Spurs were the best fit for him, and because I felt like this is the team most likely to get the best out of him. This is the team that's most likely to appreciate his skill set. They'll appreciate that he's actually really good in the mid-range game. They'll appreciate that he defends the way he defends, that he's versatile. Right. Some of the things that maybe other teams won't really care for as much, I feel like this team will see
like
as a benefit.
He's the perfect example of a guy that was a role player in college that will have no problem being a role player in the NBA initially.
Right.
So that won't be an adjustment to him. Like a guy like Precious Achiuwa was the best player on his team and got everything ran through him at Memphis. Now he goes to the Spurs. Will he be able to adapt to that as well as Patrick Williams?
And I like Precious as an option there. To me, if these guys are off the board, which is possible, I think he would be a decent fallback option because again, the athletic profile of the team to me is still so subpar that he would help that a lot.
So the question, I know a lot of people at this point, everyone has Patrick Williams ahead of Precious. If you, I followed these guys a lot in high school and obviously a big college basketball fan. I know for a fact Memphis isn't trading Precious Achiuwa for Patrick Williams. And I don't know if Florida State would say no to a Precious. They would have said no to a Precious Achiuwa for Patrick Williams trade. Now again, better college basketball player doesn't mean you're a better NBA player. You could have said the same about plenty of those situations. But sometimes I do wonder, about a guy that is in a certain situation for him to thrive, and you put them in similar situations in the NBA, and I don't know if Precious was in this great situation and Patrick Williams wasn't. I feel like Patrick Williams may have actually been in a better situation than Precious. Even though Precious had a lot of volume, he didn't have much help versus Patrick Williams, who had a lot of help around him. So
and
it's
and,
an
and
interesting
Precious and
situation.
Precious spent almost the whole season playing, out of position. Maybe it's not out of position in the NBA considering small ball fives are in vogue right now, but
Yeah,
he was playing out of position. He went there to be the secondary big
yeah, the
next
weak
to
side shot blocker.
next to James Wiseman, and that didn't happen. Whereas Williams went to Florida State, and again that was a really well put together team. Hence why they were one of the best teams in the country. And he had a specific role, and he played it well. Again, it wasn't like he had big numbers, but if you put Williams on Memphis, is that production the same? I almost certainly don't think he puts up what Precious
20
did.
and 10.
But that's at the end of the day, that's not the conversation we're having. In terms of drafting pick players, it's who makes sense in the NBA.
Yeah, you look at traits.
Yes,
You don't look at the jersey. You don't look at the name.
right.
You look at your traits.
And Williams has some traits. Again, the ISO potential, the mid-range game, the athleticism, the defense. He has some things that you look at as a potential 3-4 combo. You're like, that's some very enticing skills there. Now, can you put it together to be a complete player who plays on a consistent basis like that? That's going to be the question for him. What do you guys think the San Antonio Spurs should do in this draft? Do you agree with Kendall that a trade up is something that they definitely need to consider? And do you like the idea of Avdia or Hayes being targets? What do you think about Patrick Williams at 11 or Precious Achiuwa potentially? Make sure you leave a comment and what you think should happen. And of course, if you like this video, make sure you like it and subscribe to our channel, New Generation Media. That'll do it for now. For Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.